Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
I welcome you to part two of a two-week series. Last week and again this week we're discussing life today in Zimbabwe, which is a country in Africa, in the southern part of that continent. And we're so pleased to have with us our guest from last week back, Sharon Daniels Bullock. She and her spouse spent fall semester in that country, and Sharon is the coordinator of the North Idaho College Center for Educational Access. When she returned, I was impressed with her description of the country, and we thought it would make a very, very informative two-week series with you. Sharon, welcome back to the program from last week. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And as always, I'm pleased to have our two regular panelists. First of all is Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Erna Reinhardt, who is the Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, and Janelle will commence today's questioning.
Welcome back, Sharon. It was very informative last week, and I'm sure our viewers will find it equally informative this week. You talked a little bit last week about transportation, just basically, but I'd like to talk about it in a little more depth. First of all, how did you get to Zimbabwe? From this part of the country, we're talking about Coeur d'Alene, Spokane, Washington. How did you get to Zimbabwe?
Well, we flew from Spokane to Seattle to London, and then London to Harare directly into Zimbabwe.
Okay, so you didn't go through South Africa to arrive there?
Not to arrive there, no. When we returned, we did. We went through Johannesburg.
And you flew there, so to your town of Mutare. Did they have air availability to that
Actually,
town?
we flew into Harare, and then the university sent a driver for us who picked us up at the airport and then drove us back to Mutare.
So you could drive. Were there buses also? Could you have taken a bus?
We could have taken a bus, although we were told to be careful of taking buses because, well, first of all, we had a lot of luggage to carry, and that would have just been difficult. But also because the buses may not have been in top running condition because of the economic conditions in the country.
And do they have trains as well, train transportation? Or not
they do,
much?
But still the same story. People saying it's time to be careful about using the trains because of the lack of repairs and money to keep them up.
And what kinds of cars would you see generally on the road? Do you see American cars, European models? What kinds of cars, or were they unidentifiable?
No, they were actually, I don't pay that much attention to cars, but I certainly saw the usual kinds of cars that I would see here in the United States, some old, some new, just not as many. Probably more old, the kind of cars that, you just got to keep them going, than new. But definitely what was different was the lack of traffic. I mean, we literally drove all the way across Zimbabwe at one point and saw a remarkably low number of cars on the roads.
So people don't travel much, is what you're saying. In addition to the economic situation, they may not travel much from place to place across the country.
No, they don't. They may travel, they try to travel from outside town and through town, around towns, but not from place to place. No, that would be very expensive. I think right now, prohibitive. They would not be able to do that.
Erna Reinhardt.
Sharon, describe for our viewers what some of the typical accommodations might be for a family, and not only the accommodations, but maybe a little bit about what would their diet be, and what are their greatest needs of a typical family there.
Well, those that live in the rural areas they will have a hut. I call it a hut. I'm not sure they do. It's round. It may have a thatch roof. Some are made out of straw. Some are made out of mud. Some are made out of brick, depending upon the wealth of the family. But they are, like I said before, they're very clean. That would be in the rural areas. In the inner city areas, the university staff lived in apartment complexes, or they may live in some of the neighborhoods in brick homes or older, small buildings. I think what was most remarkable to me were how small everything was for the number of people living in it. What I saw and experienced was that most people are living in rooms smaller than we would consider two people ever to live in, let alone the 9 or 10 or 12 that are living in those rooms. I was amazed at the small space. They still had a little chair to sit in and a little space for a stove and a little space for a bed, but that was all. So I think the size of the homes were what was most remarkable to me. A lot of them cooked outside on firewood, campfires, so to speak, and had gardens outside, and the food they ate, mostly the staple is sadza, cornmeal mush, which they boil, and not a lot of other kinds of things to go with it. I would say there is a huge number of people I understand who are starving, over 1 million. The people now, I would say, mostly barely get what they need. They're eating sadza, but I'm concerned about where the country's going because I don't know how much longer that's all they can eat. They're not eating what they want to eat. They're eating sadza. That's good, but that's not everything that they should have. They do have gardens, but it still isn't the kind of things that they want to eat. For example, cooking oil. I mean, we were buying cooking oil for people because they could not afford to pay for cooking oil, which became sugar and coffee we were bringing them because those were luxuries they no longer could have. So even though they have, in one level, something to eat, they do not have what they need. And either in the sense of being able to get it, can you even get it in the grocery store? I went to the grocery store. I couldn't get a loaf of bread for a number of weeks. I couldn't get cheese for a number of weeks went by because we couldn't get it in the store. Every time we went, it seemed like there would be out of something else. And so we'd have to make do with something else. So and with it being that way and the way the economy is going, I'm wondering how long they can continue to do this.
You indicated on the program last week there are about 13 million people now living in the country. But after we went off the air, you made a comment that just is really very sad, is from our lifespan in this country. You indicated that women live to be, on the average, about 37 years old, and the men about 34.
The other way, yeah.
Yeah, or the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Women living a little bit longer than the men.
Or the women living 34.
And the
men living 37.
37.
Uh-huh.
That's unusual because in this country, women live
Uh-huh.
longer than men. That's why I was confused. But at that very short lifespan and still having that many millions of people, they must have a lot of children. Otherwise, if they only had 1 or 2 children, the population would really go down much faster. Are the families quite large?
They are. They are quite large in most cases, I would say. I saw families with 8 to 12 children. That wasn't unusual. What's happening is the children are those who are dying. Not the children, but the parents of the small children.
Well, if you live to be 34 or 37, you're likely to have fairly young children when you die.
Yes, and so the grandparents are being asked to take care of them.
Of those that live.
Of the children.
I would tend to think that the grandparents are fewer in number because if that's the average lifespan, you would have a smaller senior citizen population.
Actually, I don't have the statistics on it. What I experienced was that there was an older group that was there, and then there were children. And the ones that seemed to be missing were those between 20 and 35. And so I don't know if the numbers average out, that there are so many missing.
Yes, or another number of children die, that would bring down the average too.
Yes.
Another question that has to do with health, and what we hear about in the United States so much is that AIDS has been rampant throughout Africa, and I know there's a lot of our Congress and our president have worked, and President Bush had a rather large appropriation, and the Clinton Foundation, Bill Clinton, is putting a lot of money into Africa in dealing with AIDS, as well as President Bush's appropriation. What are people dying of? I know AIDS is one of them. You say it's one of the most serious reasons for death, and that it's about the second country with the number of AIDS deaths on a per capita basis. Is that right?
I don't know that number specifically, but yes, it's very high.
It's higher than even some of the other African countries.
Yes.
What else are people dying of other than AIDS?
I know that I was told that TB is becoming a huge problem because although the health care for TB is at no cost to them because that is funded by the Catholics, they can't get there to get the help. They don't have the gas, they don't have the money to pay for the x-ray, they don't have the money to pay for the medication once they get there. And so though the hospital exists, they can't get there. So now they're staying home and they're infecting other people. So TB is becoming a real problem, as I am told. I was saying I could not count how many people died while I was there. They died, I was told, of chest aches, stomach aches, headaches. They never knew what they died of. No one ever told them what they died of.
In addition to AIDS and TB, there is another main problem of illness there, other than what you're saying, the headaches and all. What's the other disease that takes a lot of people?
Those were the two that were the main diseases causing death. Malaria
is another
exists,
problem.
yes.
With that, Sharon, let's take a look at, our viewers again want to know, I'm sure, some visuals of your trip.
Okay.
And we have several photographs, and we'll put those up, and you can describe what they are for our viewers.
This is the deaf community. We're at a church, Hilltop Church. Zimbabwe is largely a Christian country. So most people attend a Christian church of some sort. It's a very important part of their life, and a lot of the social services and support systems come through the church rather than the agencies. This is what is happening here. This is a deaf community that has been supported by the person that we saw last week, Libby Foster. She worked with these two pastors in this church, and he helped her to teach 15 young people how to speak Zim sign so that they could begin to communicate with this deaf community, huge deaf community, both in Zimbabwe and in Africa.
So a lot of Christian faith religions from the United States is working in that country.
Yes, there are a lot. This is the hospital at Old Mutare. This is also a hospital that is free of cost if people can get there, but once again, they have to be able to get there, and that's the problem. There are only a few people in this room, as you can see. There are 2 more wards like this that were completely empty.
So it's just a matter of being able to reach out to them to get them there.
To get them there, that is the issue. They just don't have they don't have cars, they don't have gas, they don't have money for the bus.
So those people who live in the larger cities have better care because they're nearby the hospital rather than the more rural areas.
Yeah, and this is the larger city. So they can't get here. So
it's amazing.
Yeah. This is these are some orphans at Old Mutare. They were very happy to have their picture taken here.
We've done several programs on African countries, including Ethiopians. The children always love to have them photographs.
I know. These are more orphans at St. Augustine's. This is what I say is Zimbabwe's legacy. The question we put to some of them on a few occasions was, so what will your country look like in 15 years? And it is a question that they absolutely cannot answer. It takes their breath away. But these children, and actually you can't see, a lot of these children actually had lesions from AIDS. But these children are children largely, I don't know the percentages exactly, but the case is their parents have died of AIDS, and so they are here, and they are not infected, but they are Zimbabwe's legacy. And this is just a little boy whose face just took my heart. and he wanted his picture taken. The shirt he's wearing, that's his good shirt. He was very happy to have his picture taken and very pleased to be able to see it. It's just...
You can see he's very happy to pose for that.
Mm-hmm. This is something that's quite important in discussion in Zimbabwe and in Africa, South Africa. This is Sister Evelyn. She has been there about a year working in an AIDS program. This is her herb garden. And it was explained to me that these herbs are grown in order that they can create lotions for people who have AIDS that really is helpful for their lesions and so on. But there's a huge controversy around this, and there was in South Africa the entire time that I was there, because they want the people to use medicine, and they don't want them being told, oh, you should be using these herbs will help you. Well, a good diet and herbs do help you if you're sick and you have AIDS, but the people should be being told to use the medicine, but the medicine's not there. So shouldn't they use the herbs? Then the people think, well, I'll just use the herbs because I can't get the medicine. And then they say, well, don't use herbs because you should use medicine. It goes around and around. And Sister Evelyn told me that this really does work. It is helpful to them. They do not have access to the medicine. All they have are these herbs. But she was quite enthusiastic about its ability to heal the lesions. This is just a shot of an important event that took place at Africa University while I was there. Just to the right there is the VC, Dr. Marapa, Professor Marapa at Africa University. And then to the left is a string of dignitaries, African dignitaries from all over Africa. It was quite impressive. Ambassadors, the governor of Manicaland, former presidents and prime ministers of other African countries came. Even the president of Zimbabwe was invited to come to this. He couldn't at the last minute. But, and I had an opportunity to hear a lot of them speak, and it was quite interesting to hear their story about Africa and what they thought and how they felt about the situation in Africa. Part of it being that they've received their independence 2-3 decades ago, depending on which African country you're talking about, that they are an adolescent, so to speak, that they're trying to grow up, that they're struggling, that the older children are grabbing and taking and not giving to the younger children, so to speak. It was very interesting to listen to them talk about colonialism and what that's done to their country.
You were very fortunate to be at that. That was the most informative meeting.
Oh, it was very, very interesting.
And we have one final photograph.
This is just a picture of me during a class. This was one of the classes for the Institute for Peace, Leadership, and Governance that I went to, and we discussed gender issues and issues of disability in Zimbabwe.
Again, I'm like you, impressed. They keep everything so nice, and it's just really sparkling clean, and how they, not only there, but in the homes and all the things that you show.
It is very
They
nice.
really are. They are really caring people and working hard as they can, with great poverty as a challenge to them.
Yes, they are very hard-working people. I was very impressed.
Janelle Burke.
You had a number of pictures of children, and they were most engaging. What kind of education do these children get? And I'm talking now just not about the orphans, but about children in general. What kinds of education would they get, and how much?
They would get 12. They're 12 years, as we would in the United States. They do have to pay to have their children go to school, unlike the United States, where we have free public education. They do not. So for every child they have in school, they have to pay fees. That becomes a tremendous challenge to them. Kids in the schools all wear uniforms. It's basically a British system of education, so they have to finish O levels and then A levels if they want to go on to college. And it's a good system. I think it's a good educational system, and people in Zimbabwe would tell you that they had a wonderful, one of the best educational systems in Africa before this happened.
Do they speak English?
Yes.
Do they learn English?
They are taught English. That is the official language. It seemed kind of odd to me, that they shouldn't they be speaking Shona? That's what I kept thinking. At the university, though, it is, remember, an international college, and so there are people from all over Africa speaking all kinds of languages, and the only thing they had in common was to speak English. So it seemed to make sense. It did create some communication problems, though, in terms of people speaking a second or third or fourth or fifth language. So, but yes, the children are all taught English. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Erna Reinhardt.
Sharon, I know you told me earlier that one of the joys that you got from this trip was being able to give some of your things away that you felt like you could leave behind without missing them a lot. And I know one of those things was a pair of shoes. If you could just share that story with us, I think that would be wonderful.
There was a young mother who came to me. Actually, she asked me for help. She saw me in my flat and she asked me for help. She had two babies. A little girl was probably 4 or 5 years old, and that baby that she carried on her back. And she came to my door, and I asked her to come around to the door of the flat, and she told me her story of her husband had taken another wife, and she was now alone, and she had these 2 children to care for, and her mother and she were alone, didn't have a lot of food, and she basically was going to do what she needed to do to take care of her kids, and that was to get the help that she needed. She had a broken thong, and so I gave her a pair of my shoes. I gave her food and I gave her money as well. It's a very hard thing to be in a country where so many people need so much, and it almost makes you feel like throwing your hands up and saying, you know what, it's just too big. But I think it's important for all of us, especially those who have been blessed to be born in America, to remember that even if you help one person, just one person, then you've helped someone. And if all of us helped one person, that we could help an awful lot of people. So I keep that in mind, and that's how I look at it, that one person or those 5 people or whoever's life that I could touch is very well worth it, very well worth the effort.
Sharon, some of our viewers like to get in contact with our guests from time to time, and we certainly want that opportunity for you. Our area code is 208, and Sharon Daniels Bullock, as I've indicated earlier, works at North Idaho College, and her office is at the main campus, and she's a coordinator of the North Idaho College Center for Educational Access, and her phone number has gone up on the screen, and I believe it's 208-769, and then it's 7794.
Correct.
Again, for those who might not have gotten a pen, we'll say it's 208 is the area code, 769-7794, and Sharon would be delighted to talk with you about any interest you have in this important topic. One of the great challenges economically in that country is that it just has incredible inflation. In this country, it's at 2 or 3%, and if we get to 10 or 12%, it's really serious. We think, I believe their inflation rate now is over 1,000%. Mm-hmm. So even if you are able to make a living somehow with some money, this becomes less and less viable and buy less and less. Is that correct?
That is correct. When we were there, a loaf of bread cost, when we first arrived, was $100 Zim, and when
what would that be the equivalent in American money?
Maybe 25 cents. By the time we left, the same loaf of bread was $850 Zim.
So it's more than double in a short time.
Oh yeah, or 10 times. Bus fare went from $4,000 between Mutare and Harare to $12,000. A month's wages for an average person, and I'm speaking about a person, not a college-educated, master's-educated person, but an average person, is maybe 18,000, 20,000 Zim a month. So a little hunk of cheese, 3 by 3 by 1 was 4,000 Zim. And it's all gone up so much more since then, since I left and came back in December. It's gone up like 10 times. So I don't know where will this end? I don't know.
The government doesn't seem to be doing anything to try to check this process.
No, there is no end in sight to this.
There's just no economic balancing or controlling of the process.
No.
Yep, in spite of all of that, I know when you spoke earlier, I was impressed with how much you were impressed with the people. And talk just a minute about, they still have hope, and would you share that with our viewers?
Oh, there were times when I just was in tears in the chapel. There's a song that they sing. Oh, they sing so wonderfully. And they sing a song called The Dream is Alive. And they sing the song at the university, how much they love. It's about how much they love that university and that the dream is alive because of it. They have a chance for education. They have a chance to get jobs that pay well. Of course, all this economic stuff is in the background, but they sing that song, and I just would cry. And of course, they would look at me like, "What are you crying about? You know, we don't know what you're crying about." But they were amazingly hopeful and talked about their future in positive ways. They recognized what was going on, but they still said, "No, we will be positive. We need to be positive, and we love our peace."
One thing you did, and you brought back, and I don't want to leave the air without this, you asked the people, what message do you want me to bring back to America, and what was that message?
The message the people told me as I talked with them about what they were going through was they wanted me to tell the people in America that they are suffering and that they are afraid.
They're suffering and afraid. That is very, very touching, and but they still have their hope, and there's lots of things that Americans can do, and I know that you're going to speak soon at Mutare College on what we call the Popcorn Forum, and you've taken on that responsibility of trying to get people to give blankets and shoes and toys and all, and I'm sure that the media will cover that. And again, but if there are viewers out there that would also like to join in that, they're not here in our area, we have given them your phone number, and so they can get in touch with you, or they can get in touch with us here at Mutare College. It's been a pleasure to have you go do that, because it is really important. You are an ambassador for the special people that you met, and so we hope that that you take pride and confidence in the fact that you are making a difference. As numbers of people, we have some wonderful foundations too that are doing this, and one of our friends is Greg Carr, who is got a 20-year contract in the neighboring country of Mozambique, and he's doing a lot of work too, and I know he'd be very proud of what you're doing in a neighboring country to help, and he's impacting in a very major way. On that note, we would like to thank you, Sharon Daniels Bullock, for your 2 weeks with us on discussing life today in Zimbabwe, and we'll thank our panel again for their good questions, and our staff, all the hard work they do. Ladies and gentlemen, with this we bring to conclusion a 2-week series with our guest Sharon Daniels Bullock addressing life in Zimbabwe. Next week we'll turn to another subject. Until then, I hope you will be willing to come back and be with us. And until next week, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.